and welcome to BNEWS In Depth. I'm Sydney Boles. Those who pay attention to town meeting may recall a marathon session where Burlington's 126-member legislative body voted to fund an upgrade to the middle school field. It was a raucous and extensive conversation. Parents and community members joined to observe and to lobby for more playable fields for youth sports. And some town members worried about the cost. A planned $6.7 million project got cut in two, with a final spend of $4.77 million approved to renovate the brush field. Now, a committee has begun meeting to talk about what that field should look like and oversee the construction. We're digging into that project today and into the bigger picture of sports fields in Burlington. We begin with an inside look at what it takes to make sports programming run. Shaun Hart is the athletic director at Burlington Schools, and Bob Cunha is the director of operations, responsible for keeping buildings and grounds up and running. I started by asking Shaun Hart to give us an overview of our fields as they are today.
Speaking to Burlington as a whole versus Burlington athletically, I think those are conversations that we have quite a bit. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of fields in Burlington that Burlington athletics, meaning high school and middle school athletics, don't use. So not that those fields aren't important, but they're just out of my purview, and Bob speaks to them more than I do, and more so because he has kids in the town who actually play on them, so he has a lot more knowledge of those than I do. As far as the high school level fields, obviously varsity field and our practice facility here are two of our mainstays. We redid that 2 years ago now. I think anybody who's driven through Burlington knows exactly what that field is and how that field is. I mean, again, state of the art. It's gorgeous the way it's been produced, the colors on it, the lighting is amazing. It's a top in the state facility. Has a track that's able to run high level meets, state level meets, which there are not a lot of in the state actually. So again, another facility upgrade for us that we have here that a lot of people don't have. We use the Marshall Simonds facility, brush field there, the grass fields there. We use Memorials Elementary School. We use Francis Wyman, which is undergoing a baseball field renovation right now. We've used Rahanis Park. We use Marvin Field for softball, and I'm probably forgetting one, but I can't remember if I am or not.
So yeah,
the Ice Palace, that's true.
So we're kind
point.
of using whatever's available to us to figure out how to get all these sports the spaces that they need. And then Bob, I'll turn to you. When it comes to maintenance and upkeep for these, give me a sense for how much effort goes into maintaining our different fields. And specifically, this conversation, we're focusing on the middle school, right? So talk about the difference between maintaining something like the high school field, which was recently renovated, and then over at the middle school, it's a little older, might require some more upkeep. Is that kind of fair?
Yeah, kind of. So, I mean, we look at maintenance a couple different ways. So, Recreation, who should also join this meeting, is responsible for maintaining all the fields. So, we work in partnership with the Recreation Director, Recreation Committee, and of course, the staff of the Recreation. So, when it comes to cutting grass, maintaining, et cetera, Recreation. Also, when we start looking at bigger projects, we combined with the Recreation in our master plan, which was just put together 2 years ago, to look at bigger picture, right? So we can't all ask for fields every single year, but they are important to us. So working with the Recreation Department, athletics, and myself and other members of the field committees to figure out, what our needs are. So that's definitely something that we need to consider.
Okay. You touched on this, Shaun, a minute ago, saying that the high school field is kind of state of the art. Broadcloth, when you talk about the middle school, the high school, all of our various fields combined, the fields that we use for athletics. Bob, how would you say we compare to other similarly sized towns in our area?
Again, I think every town is going to have one of their state-of-the-art facilities and then some facilities that need some repair, right? I think we're in the same category as that. We have some of our lesser used fields or maybe some of our smaller fields that don't have all the amenities. As Shaun mentioned, varsity field minus the bathroom facility is a great playing field, period. Hands down, it's great. The existing turf field at the middle school is a great playing field. We lack bathrooms and even seating capacity. With the upgrade to the new field, we'll bring accessibility over there. We'll bring lights to the backfield, so we'll add more turf playing surfaces. So we'll have 3 state-of-the-art, really great facilities. Again, bathrooms and parking are going to be big issues at many facilities, right? Those are just big ticket items that a lot of towns don't have. So that's something where we probably need to look further into and maybe improve at some of our facilities.
Does that seem right to you, Shaun?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just to go back to the earlier point that you made, being able to take care of fields is a school and a rec, together kind of thing. So when we had the fields put in, the town bought the proper equipment to maintain those fields. And having those fields maintained at such a high level is the reason why our fields have maintained longer life, better structure, more ability to have youth on them longer, and have been safe for longer because of the great job they do in that. And I think that has to be said.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I want to move towards talking about the middle school project that was recently approved at town meeting, and that's now, there's a committee that's starting to work on what that might look like. But Shaun, I want to stick with you for a second. One of the things that came up in that town meeting discussion was some concern from, I think it was fair to say, mostly parents about the fields that we have now meant that some teams sometimes were kind of relegated to practicing at times that weren't great. We might have like young kids practicing later at night. Does that seem fair? And I guess could you talk to like what goes into scheduling the fields that we have now? Like how do you make the puzzle pieces fit?
Well, I think a couple things. I think fairness and wanting the best facility are different questions.
Yeah.
So do we have enough space for people to practice at normal times? We do. What we don't have is we have 2 state-of-the-art fields in Burlington, which if you asked anybody if you could practice on grass or over there on that dirt patch, or you can practice on these state-of-the-art facilities, I think everybody jumps in line. And sometimes you'd rather wait to be later to get on the better surface than be earlier on what people, not as good a surface.
Okay.
So I think those are a little different. To the point, we have a later school start time in Burlington than some of our surrounding towns. We don't get out of school until 3 o'clock. In fairness, practices can't start before 3:30 because, again, if you're practicing on varsity field, then you can walk out of the building and get there. But there is no other place that we practice that is a simple walk to get there to start your practice. So you're starting at 3:30. A minimum practice time for most varsity level teams is JV level teams, freshman level teams is at minimum is an hour and a half. So again, right there, you're already pushing later into the evening. And then if you have a game, we all know that could take longer. So again, it's budgeting the time, but also trying to be fair with making that budget cut exactly where it needs to be to get the next group in and on. And honestly, in Burlington, on varsity field and on brush field, we see it all the time. We're finishing a game, there's another team standing there waiting, but you know what? They're cheering, they're watching, they're part of what we're doing. So again, like as much as they're aggravated that they're waiting, they're involved in what we're doing, and we appreciate that so much. And then we try our best to get ourselves off that field as quick as possible so they can get on. So again, I don't know that you can see it as fair or unfair, but again, there's a method to that madness that we're all trying to kind of figure out. And with the new fields coming online, we're hoping that will thin it out a bit and make it easier for everybody, because again, more fields of that same caliber is going to mean more practices for us getting done faster, and then them, meaning youth, getting on sooner to get their earlier times. Yeah,
a little bit more slack in the schedule there.
Right.
Yeah. So let's talk about the project of getting to the proposal that came before town meeting. You mentioned the master plan, Bob. Walk me through how you and your team, I'm imagining, Shaun, that you were a part of those conversations. How did the vision come together, and then how did you end up getting to the point where this sort of became a real thing?
Well, the master plan is quite simply, right? We hired an outside company to come in and give us a 10,000-foot view of what our fields are. So that means they look at the current facilities as they sit and also what's played on them. So if you look at varsity field, it's probably our #1 field in the town. We're the high school turf field #2. And then there'd be a close argument to say what's our third, but it looks like the middle school field on the back gets the most use as well as #3 position. So that being said, it kind of dictates what, the perceived, plan would be, right? That doesn't mean that we can't move things around. It doesn't mean that we can't say pickleball is now more important than anything else and we need to build a new pickleball facility. So that's an outside vendor looking at us saying, here's their projection. Now, myself, Shaun, and Brendan from Rec Department have met prior to having any field committees. So we have some play in that as well too, knowing, like I said, what's our top facilities and what our needs are. So we look at that. The 10-year plan, like I said, is in place, and thankfully town meeting did support the middle school field. So with that, we actually have two parts to that, right? So one is the front field to get resurfaced, and then what was accepted at town meeting is to build a new field in the back. So that would take that grass field and elevate that to a turf field, add some lighting all around, accessible walkways, a ramp from the back parking lot down, which provide accessibility for students and residents. So it really will be an increase to overall playability in fields in Burlington.
Do you feel like the answer to this question can just be no, and that's okay? But I wonder, do you feel like the expectations for professionalism, for quality of school athletic properties is changing? Are the expectations for what that looks like higher than it was 10 years ago, or is it the same?
Let me ask you a question. In what phase of your life is that not true in every single thing
that
you
the
could
expectations are always
different
driving?
from 10 years ago to now? In
Of course.
sneakers, in shirts that we're wearing, in sets that we're talking on, what isn't? So again, I think the answer is always going to be yes. The next best thing is always right around the corner, and it's a race to see who can get it, or how it happens, or how it fits into what you do. But again, I mean, I think that in the evolution of fields, there is a different argument to where we live versus someplace else. If we were living in Florida right now, the argument for a turf field is lessened because of the weather and the ability to get on it. It's not lessened in the fact that who can play on it and how much durability it has compared to grass, but those questions are answered a little differently. Here, we know that in late November, we could get snow. We're not using it in December. We're not using it in January, but we could be using it as early as February with our new weather pattern that we seem to have now. But again, as soon as you get a cold day in March, now you can actually use fields, save grass surface for an extra couple weeks because we have these fields, and baseball fields and baseball teams and softball teams can get on those fields, which are not usually teams that would get on them. But now we can get them time and be doing these things. So the evolution of where we live and how we live is all kind of moving in a direction.
Yeah, plus I think quite simply, I mean, these fields are just a wear and tear item, right? So we know that they're going to need maintenance and upgrades, replacement, et cetera, and plus the numbers game works in our favors, right? So our sports, our music events, our just general outside events that are happening on these fields isn't shrinking, right? And anytime there's an opportunity, those fields can and will be used, right? So there's just a constant want for them. So that's also pushing our envelope to maintain, a high standard of fields in Burlington.
So this project goes through town meeting. It's $4.77 million
Correct.
approved to upgrade the brush field to turf, add accessibility, make it all fancy. Yes. Are there any other pieces of that project that you wanna highlight? Paint the vision for me that you're excited about. Either one of you.
Well, I think it's an open end, right? But what we've decided so far at the field committee meeting is that there are a couple items, right? So first and foremost, turf field, right? So whatever that entails, the underlayment, et cetera, but turf field. We also need to be able to get there, so accessible walkways and accessible ramp from the back down in order to provide a lengthened day lighting. Then, of course, there becomes landscaping and seating to make sure that the whole facility is appearance-wise great, but also usable too. And then we have to talk about the safety of it, so whether that means adding nets and fencing and so forth. So those are the majority items that have to happen. There are some other items that are still on the fence that may be depending on if there's money available or maybe in a second phase of that project. But again, the core items are definitely something that we're focusing on.
And then the other piece of that, you mentioned this before, is that there was a sort of a part two to that with the upper field at the middle school that was not approved. Town meeting sort of bifurcated those two pieces. Yep. I imagine you'll want to pursue those other upgrades maybe at a later date. How are you thinking about that piece of it now?
Exactly as you mentioned. So it was proposed as original, the whole entire Marshall Simonds complex as one for $7.2 million. At town meeting, it was decided to split it into two phases and do the backfield and the front field separately. So while we're calling it a phase two, it hasn't been proposed to town meeting. I would expect that we will come back to town meeting at some point because the turf does need replacement and so does the track need to be upgraded. So that would be what we're calling phase 2. It may be exactly as presented. It may have some additional items in it. We're not sure yet, but that's something that we're working on now to try to figure out what that next phase looks like. So I would expect that we will come back to town meeting with a proposal for a phase 2. And again, could there be a phase 3 in that building? Maybe. But ultimately, we'll be working with the recreation department, athletics as well too, to make sure that it fits our timeline, and then working with town groups such as Ways and Means, et cetera, to make sure that this fits into our financial plan moving forward.
Okay, so talk to me about the committee. You've met for the first time, is that right? Or you started meeting? Not yet?
3 meetings so far.
3 meetings so far. Okay,
3 meetings.
So what's the vibe? Who's on it? Like, what are you starting to talk about? And I know you both are there, so Shaun, we'll start with you.
The vibe.
The all-important vibe.
The
Don't
vibe.
just cut the vibe.
No, it's a good group, and again, so you have members of the school committee, you have several parent groups from the community that are youth organizations. Myself and Bob are on it. Jeremy Brooks is running it, member of the school committee, and also on the town recreation committee. Brendan Egan is on it from the recreation department.
Lindsay Carlson is the chair of recreation. She is on it as well. Dr. Cunha, the superintendent's on it. And again, parents. So we definitely have a broad spectrum of
parents
of members to this committee.
Yep.
Yeah, so tell me about the vibes. How are you starting to talk about shaping this? What's the initial first moves?
Well, go ahead.
I'll go. So the first move obviously was the introductions. After that, it was really bringing our engineer on. So we have hired Nezra Engineering, and we're kind of letting them steer the ship a little bit. So as a committee, we've talked about what possibility of options that we want to see and what we wanted to address with the engineer. That being said, we've also set our guidelines of core items, like I just mentioned, that we have to get done. Now what happens is the engineer is doing some field studies and coming back to us with any updated proposals, materials, et cetera, for then the committee. So I think what needs to be clear is that the committee has some clear guidelines. We can always go back and ask for more money if that's the conversation that comes from this, but ultimately it's that we were presented with a proposal, and now the committee's job is really to fulfill that proposal and make sure that we can get the project completed.
I'm imagining a lot of this is still to be determined, the specifics of how it's going to work, how it's going to come together. Is there anything that you can say sort of within the realm of seasons or years of what the timeline is supposed to look like?
Yeah, if everything goes to plan, we expect by September of next year the field to be complete.
Wow, that's fast.
If we can stay on that. So it is a fast track timeline. So the engineer has presented us with a detailed schedule. What could possibly hold that up is obviously the committee making final decisions. The next part of that would be permitting. So that means we have to go through town and state departments to make sure that all of our permits are applicable. Then once we go out to bid, making sure that we have a contractor who can source all the equipment and then do the work. If that's the case, then hopefully by June we can start construction. And then if we have June, July, and August, we should be on task to finish before September.
So potentially it wouldn't be a huge disruption to athletics, Shaun, because most of the construction would happen over the summer.
Right, and that's kind of that's the reason why we tried to fall in line with this, because again, like most of the things, getting ready for the fall, the field is relatively not used a lot in the summer. You know what I mean? So we figured if we could do the bulk of that work in those summer months, by getting those crews out there and ready to go, that if we can hit the ground running, and even if it budged into September a little bit, we would still be in a good spot.
Yeah, and then the positive side of this is that we would still keep the front field, which is currently turf, in play while the construction is happening in the backfield. Hopefully once the backfield is completed, and if we do move on to phase 2, we then would shut down the front field, so we would still have one field in play.
Okay. We're speaking on just a few days after the news was made public that BHS Associate Principal Hockey Coach Rick Sheehan was recognized. He got some acclaim from the Wasabi Fenway Bowl for his exceptional work as coach. I'm sure you guys are celebrating him. I bring it up because there was a video that was released. I thought it was fantastic. It's on the Globe website if people want to go look for it. It was essentially Coach Sheehan talking about the way that Burlington invests in, cares about athletics, the intention behind our athletic programming, and the way that like translates to the kids. The kids feel it. Shaun, can you just talk about why you see the importance of the properties that undergird the athletic department.
Well, again, so we spend a lot of time with these kids, and I think sometimes you forget, a whole full school day plus an additional 2 hours of practice every single day, probably 6 days a week. So the relationships that are built between coaches and students it's amazing. In our athletic department, we preach a lot of don't just show up on day one of your sport and expect that those relationships are going to get built and then disappear until the next season starts. We have a tremendous group of coaches here who have been doing it for a really long time. We have tremendous bonds with these athletes and students in general. And you get to see it Bob could tell you, when he's at a football game on a Friday night with his kids, how many kids come back from years past to just be around it and see it. So I think that's the atmosphere that we want to provide to them. And again, in regards to Rick, we've known each other for a long, long time. He's a phenomenal coach. He does a lot for kids. But again, it's not the coaching part that he's going to be ever remembered for. It's going to be the fact that he's built relationships. He just absolutely cares about kids, and he's just real in his way he does business. And I think that goes a long way. And that's a lot of our coaches. I would say all of our coaches. They give much, much more than is the norm for that. And I think that it's almost expected now. And I think that people understand it, and it's amazing that they're doing it. And I think that it's what we're kind of fostering here.
Yeah, absolutely. Bob, I'll give you the last word. This is an ambitious timeline that you were saying. I'm sure there's some stress involved, but I wonder if there's also excitement for you, if you could talk about what part of it you're most excited about, or what gives you the most enthusiasm as you embark on this.
Well, in my role, it's always new projects that give me the most excitement, right? The frustrating part, of course, is dealing with vendors and contracts and making sure all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. Yeah. So once you put all of that together and everybody in a room, we all have the same vision of getting it done as quickly, as accurately as possible. But there's just some outside factors that will come into play. So I appreciate an aggressive timeline as long as it's realistic. This one is realistic, but again, we just need to make sure that the committee is in agreement and working with us and the engineer to make sure that we can get this project started. But I really enjoy working on the project. So.
Cool. All right. Well, Bob Cunha, Director of Operations, Director of Athletics, Shaun Hart, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
That was my conversation with Bob Cunha and Shaun Hart, with the scoop on what it takes to manage the school's athletic programming. But as they mentioned, it's not just the schools that are involved in this project. Jeremy Brooks is the chair of the Field Subcommittee, a member of the Burlington School Committee, and also the school committee's representative on the Recreation Commission. So he's intimately involved in the way Parks and Rec is thinking about this project. Let's go to that conversation now. You're the school committee member, or the school committee's representative on the Recreation Commission. And you're kind of a newish person in that role. It's been about two years, coming up on 2 years.
That's correct.
So tell me about stepping into that role as kind of a dual member of those committees.
Very interesting, right? So when I won the election and got on the school committee, we reorganized, decided who was going to do what. I assumed a lot of the roles the previous member had. One of the ones I really wanted was Recreation Commission, so I threw my hat in the ring and was able to get it. And again, both my children are involved in youth sports, and I was involved very heavily in youth sports growing up here, so it's something I feel near and dear to my heart. So I just felt like a good fit for me for one of the committees to join.
So this project, this Fields project that we're here to talk about, is a collaboration between the schools and the Rec Commission. And so there are representatives from both of those groups, as well as sort of other parts of town government on that committee. So talk about how that collaboration is working, sort of what the good parts are, and maybe if there are any pain points as well.
Yes, so when we organized the committee, I was asked to chair the committee. I accepted, and my goal and my endeavor since forming the committee was to get the largest cross-section of representation from across town, right? As most folks that paid attention to town meeting remember, it was quite a bit of debate on whether or not to fund the project. Ultimately, and very graciously, town meeting did provide us the funding for this project. So I kind of took that as my charge to make sure we had as many voices on the committee as we could. So In doing that, I reached out to several youth sports committees. They provided representatives, reached out to the community, reached out to abutting neighborhood folks to make sure we didn't impact them negatively. And I think we have a pretty good cross-section of folks on that committee between community members, youth sports members, town meeting members, the other boards and commissions in town. So there's a Recreation Commission representative. There's also some from Ways and Means. So again, we're trying to make it so we can funnel all the information very efficiently and keep as many people apprised to what we're doing as we can.
I want to talk a little bit about that moment at town meeting, because it was, I think, a little bit unusual for town meeting. It was a super long conversation. I think one of the longer conversations in my time covering Burlington. There was a lot of folks from the community there. Many of them were sort of parents who were advocating for more opportunities for fields for youth sports. And there was also some real concern about both the cost of the project and the way that it was going to fit in with all of the other sort of big capital projects that are on the town's docket over the next couple of years. What was your takeaway from that kind of vigorous conversation?
Okay, from my perspective, it's, I was on the school committee. I was pushing for the project a little bit, and I did want to not withdraw the warrant article because it had met some resistance. So I'm very much the type of person that wants to understand why something didn't work. So I wanted to see if it would, to bring it to fruition, understand not only capital budget, Ways and Means, but also town meetings pain points, and understand, okay, when we come back to you next year, what are the things we need to have and where do we need to put this in the plan to make it work? There was overwhelming community support, which I think kind of turned the tide on that one, which was great. But again, it is a large expenditure, and one of the reasons we're trying to be very mindful of what we're putting into the project, getting all the goals that we set out and we told town meeting we would do, getting those put into the project as well. But again, the community outreach and the community coming out to support this was something that was a little unexpected for me, and a great thing, obviously, right? But definitely unexpected. And my goal originally was just to figure out where this didn't meet the mark. And I think we have a very clear path forward now that the Recreation Commission's field studies is completed. Their report is out. The school's report is out and has been out. We just need to coalesce those two documents and put that forward in conjunction with that. Excuse me, the 20-year capital plan that I've been brought up a few times at school committee meetings is the last thing to get that over the finish line in my mind, because then that lays out for 20 years where we think these capital expenditures are going to be, where we think these large projects are going to be, kind of in serial and in time and space. So it helps, all the other committees in town that are doing the budgeting, doing the programming, to understand where we're going to ask for these large expenditures in the future. So again, I think it was a bit of a shift in how things were done in town, but it was also a good forcing function to help say, all right, we recognize we have lots of capital projects coming up that are very expensive, and we maybe need to find some efficiencies in how we're planning these out and how we're communicating them out. And that's, really, I think, was my big takeaway from it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it has appeared to me that there's some effort in town to reshape the way that we think about our capital expenses over time. And it can be a process that feels like there's friction there sometime. When you think about, people are really passionate about which projects should go where, right? And then there's also this sort of pinch of inflation that we're all feeling that means that a project to renovate a middle school field is going to cost $4.77 million. Does it feel like a hefty burden to bear to be chairing this committee under those circumstances?
No, definitely not a hefty burden to bear. I will say all the other committees have reached out to, so I spoke to a few members of Ways and Means, spoke to some capital planning folks. They've been very supportive and said, hey, these are the things we need moving forward. So again, I think initially it was maybe just the change in process that caused some of the uneasiness, which again, I completely understand. But to that point, I think, again, we really need to communicate out better. At least from my committee, or the school committee rather, and also being on the rec commission, we need to communicate out better when we're going to need these large capital needs, and I think we're moving in that direction. So change is always hard, right? I wouldn't say there's any friction with any of the other boards. It's just understanding maybe a new way to do business and how we're going to do it better, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about the specifics of this project a little bit. I think any project has problems that it's trying to solve, right? It's trying to find the right solution to the problem. So talk about the lay of the land as it is and what problems the field project is attempting to solve.
Sure. So the biggest challenge is field usability and accessibility in my mind. So if you look at Brush Field, you have the turf field that's kind of close to the parking lot and the road. The two fields behind it are grass. In the spring, once things start to thaw, the left side of that field, if you're looking at Brush Field from the parking lot, is almost completely unusable till about the end of May, beginning of June, because it retains so much water. The lawnmowers get stuck, and then the vehicles that recover them get stuck.
Not ideal.
Yeah, no. So we have that, and then there's obviously the accessibility aspect of it, right? So there's not really any ADA accessible parking there right now. There is no ramp or way to get students or community members down to the field to be able to watch a game, to be able to use that facility in some way. Right now, students have to be taken out of the classroom, kind of by the cafeteria side, and they have to go all the way down the hill to get in on the bottom of the brush field to get around. So it's a very long, like almost 10-minute to 15-minute process, depending on where you're coming from, for students to move in between those areas. So for a gym class or something like that, someone that has an accessibility issue is going to take them almost a quarter of the class just to get down there, which, in my mind, isn't really a good way to do business. So putting the ramp on the back side is a great way to get students in and out of there, and then ensure more community members can kind of enjoy that space.
Okay, so accessibility, more sort of seasonality, being able to use those fields more year round, and just sort of
Correct.
general upkeep, landscaping, modernization.
Yeah,
stuff.
and then some of the benefits of taking on the project are from that accessibility. It looks like we're going to be able to put a walkway all the way around the field. So we're trying to put an 8-foot paved walkway in around, which would be nice. It also increases essentially our field capacity by a third, putting that turf field to the left side, like I spoke about before. So now we have more capacity for fields, more capacity to get different organizations in. So the high school can get in, then we can get rec in early, which means we get youth sports in early, which means we get all the kids off the fields earlier, which is definitely a demand signal I heard clearly from the town, that parents are very much interested in getting their folks, or getting their children off the fields earlier than 8:30 and 9 o'clock at night. So
Yeah, let's talk about that. So actually, you were I don't think you were there, but I think your presence was felt in a school committee meeting pretty recently. There was a conversation about kind of expanding the charge of this committee to not only look at or sort of maybe you can give me the right words here if responsibility is the right word, but my understanding was there was an effort to not only look at the Marshall Simonds field renovation project, but to really kind of take a broader view of scheduling around how we're using fields, timing of how we're using fields, kind of figure out how the Marshall Simonds project fits into the way that rec and schools are collaborating on sort of sports whole cloth. Are those the right words? How are you thinking about that bigger picture look?
I think it's more a look at just going, hey, we're increasing field capacity by a full 1/3. So to use the same decision-making paradigm of how we're going to schedule, what availability we have, we, as the committee for the Marshall Simonds School Field Committee, really felt that we need to relook at that and go, hey, is there some efficiency to be gained? Is there a way to put both the high school and middle school, or school teams on the same time rec teams can be on, and stuff like that? Again, with the increase in space being a full 1/3 and adding all those fields, it felt really appropriate to relook that. So it's one of the things we spoke about in the field committee meeting was, hey, let's put a small group of folks together. So it would be Brendan Egan, Shaun Hart, Chris Hannafins, who's the lacrosse youth rep, and then Katie Toro from soccer, and I believe Myrna Saltman from town meeting was also the representatives kind of designated to take a look at that and just put a draft together. So the memorandum of understanding on how we schedule the field space and time, we're going to look at that and then go bring it to the school committee and see if they accept what we want. But again, we felt very strongly on the committee that it was time to relook that based on the added capacity.
Okay. So you've got a lot of irons on the fire here, right? You're looking at scheduling of these fields. You're looking at accessibility. You're looking at all these different pieces, and you're working with outside support, contractors on this. So talk about how you sort of take all these ideas, and work step by step to make it happen.
Yeah, it's a big undertaking for sure. Luckily, we have a very professional partner that has lots of experience doing this. So Nezzer Engineering has worked with the town previously. They have lots of experience in the area putting these fields in. So we're very comfortable with them being the lead on this. Very early on, the Burlington School District Operations Department, led by Bob Cunha, and Shaun Hart, put a very good plan together of these are items and things we want on the field and in the field complex. So there's a very clear path to success that way. So because it was very laid out in chapter and verse that, hey, we want a field like this, we want these bleachers, we want to do this accessibility, we want to do this walkway, we'd like to have a scoreboard if we can get there. The lighting's put in. It was very well thought out, and it was due to a lot of hard work of people other than me. So all we're really doing is managing the schedule to get to that realization. Nezzer Engineering's been a great partner to date, putting plans together and giving us kind of rough costs. So at our last meeting, we saw the 25% cost model with a few different options on how we could get there. All the features we want in the project fit under the budget, which is nice. We may have to have some trade space on some scoreboard size or things like that, but I think we can get most of the way there for all the field elements, the lighting, the accessibility, and the major components we have to do. I don't know there's going to be a lot of budget left to do other things we want to do, but again, we're going to try to do the best we can, but again, being mindful of the budget we have and not exceeding that in any way or leaving components to be dealt with later, right? But again, the schedule is laid out pretty well, so we need to, in our next meeting in 2 weeks, we're going to vote on the preferred, essentially, design and move that forward to the 50%, which will put us on schedule to move to bid in December. We'll be permitting through December, January into February. Early March is when we look to get construction rolling once we have all that out. So the bids will probably be out in January, be back by February, and then we're looking to break ground very early spring with a conclusion in August.
That's so speedy. So you and I are through your role on the school committee and in my role, covering the town for BCAT. I feel like we're both involved in very different ways in the Fox Hill and school committee, sure, or in high school projects. It to me on the outside feels like a little mini speedy version of those projects, right? It's a similar kind of, you get your schematics, you get your more specific plans, you go to bid. It's sort of a very similar process.
Yeah, I'm very heavily leaning on some of those lessons learned and, where we saw friction points, especially with, Fox Hill and, as we try to go through the design elements and understand. So that's why, very early on, with Mr. Cunha from the district, we said, hey, we need front load, figuring out what the things are we're going to put in, deciding on that and moving forward so the engineer can really get to work on putting the plan together to get there.
Are there things about this design that you're zeroing in on that are particularly exciting or interesting to you?
I think all of it is, right? It's going to be a great new sports complex that tons of people in town can use, not only sports, but folks that are looking to get outside and do things. We're connecting, we'd like to connect that walking path I spoke about earlier to a nature walking trail that goes back into the neighborhoods that abut the field. Again, having that ADA accessibility, having some of those natural bleachers. So on the field as the hill goes up towards the school, we're looking at putting in some natural, essentially bleachers. So it basically terraces off that hill, and there's retaining walls at each terrace. So now spectators can have a place to go and watch a game from, and you can see the entire field, not just the two fields we're putting in, but brush field as well. So I think that's pretty exciting. And again, just having a new usable field where lawnmowers don't get stuck, and we can get, almost another full season out of it because we don't miss the end of one season and the beginning of another season because the field's usable all the way through is really exciting to me. And I think it's going to help all our sports teams and, folks in the community that want to do stuff outside.
I have a question for you that I don't fully know if I have a perspective on this, and maybe the answer is just no, it's always been this way. I wonder if you think that the expectations for the quality and professionalism of student sports facilities is increasing across the board, right? If we want Burlington to be competitive, we want to be a desirable place for people to move and play and live, are the expectations going up, or is this just sort of the baseline? Do you know what I mean? Is this...
That's an interesting question. I think definitely community members in the town want to revitalize green space. I think we've heard that message pretty clearly on the rec commission, and at school committee too. We've fielded certainly some comments about, hey, why is this field this? Why is this in this state of repair? Which I think drove a lot of those feasibility studies a few years back, and because town meeting and because the town was gracious enough to grant us those funds to explore those and find out where our pain points were, things we need to address. Now it's the charge of both the school committee and I think the recreation commission, others in town to take that information we have now gained and action on it, right? Because it's great that we did the feasibility study and understood what was wrong. Now it's incumbent upon us with that information to move forward and correct those deficiencies and kind of get us to the desired state of where the community wants those athletic facilities to be. And I think it's a worthwhile undertaking, again, because we've already sunk quite a bit of money into getting feasibility studies to understand where we need to fix things, and now it's again programming out back to that 20-year plan of, hey, these are in time and space and deconflicted between the recreation commission and school committee where we're going to make large asks, so it is more palatable to the town. It doesn't affect taxes as greatly, and we're very mindful of all those things moving forward. But again, I think to your point, yeah, there is clearly a demand signal to enhance the sports facilities and bring it up to a much higher level of playing facility.
All right. Well, it sounds like a very exciting project, and with the speed of it, we'll have more to talk about soon. It sounds like.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to our interview on the field, on a brand new turf field, when you guys come out and do the retrospective on it. We get some nice shots of the new field with new walkways and bleachers and everything. It's going to be great.
We'll be there for the ribbon cutting.
Awesome.
All right. Well, Jeremy Brooks, school committee member, chair of the Fields Subcommittee. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
That was School Committee member and Recreation Commission Representative Jeremy Brooks. He's also the chair of the Field Subcommittee. This has been another edition of BNEWS In Depth. Thanks for watching.